Today I'm going to show you how to make some 3D shapes. Specifically, I'll show you how to make spheres and how to make cubes. Let's start with the sphere. Spheres are created with the highlighted all-caps keyword sphere in the same way that our two-dimensional shapes are made using their name as the function name. Sphere takes one parameter, which in the case of sphere represents the radius of it. So let's create an object named myObject. And let's make it a sphere with a radius of 1 by putting the parameter 1 into it. Now let's color it a color that you probably haven't seen before. Let's say strawberry. And then let's use the show function to display it. Let's press Show Grid to get a better view of what's going on. I would like to mention a few things about what we're currently looking at. First off, notice that our sphere is centered at the origin of the system of coordinates, where all of these arrows meet. Secondly, I'd like to remind you about what these three colored arrows are telling us. The x-axis is represented by this red arrow, the y-axis is represented by this green arrow, and the z-axis is represented by this blue arrow. The positive directions on these axes are represented by the directions that the arrows are pointing. You can remind yourself of that at any time by looking at this compass on the bottom left side of the viewport. The last thing I'd like to point out to you is that if we look closely at the sphere here, you can see that it is not perfectly round. It has a large amount of smaller, flat faces on it. Remember that earlier in the course we talked about how computers have a hard time making curved lines, so they instead make them out of line segments that are short enough so that they appear to create curved lines. Our computers are doing the same thing for this curved surface on the sphere. To create all of these faces takes a lot of computing power, so spheres can take a long time for a computer to create. Remember, if it's taking a long time for a program with a sphere in it to run. Also, an important thing to know is that all of the points in this sphere's surface are either 1 unit away from its center or slightly less just because of this. So let's switch to 2D view for a moment by selecting it off of the View menu down here. Now we can see the section of the sphere which is intersected by the XY plane. The Z-axis is pointing directly towards us. The 2D view can be useful to check on our 3D models because we can use it to check our object's dimensions and positions relative to the axes and to other objects. Now let's go back to 3D view by selecting one of the options in the View menu of the viewport. These options all just represent different angles to view the objects from, so it's not very important which one you choose. Now I want to show you how to make cubes. Cube, like sphere, is created using the all-caps highlighted keyword cube, which also takes one parameter. This one parameter represents the side length of the cube. Because cubes have same length sides, they only need one value to specify their side lengths. So let's just change sphere right here to cube in order to create a cube with side lengths of 1. And then run our program. So notice that by default, our cube is created in the first octant, or the 3D space where the X, Y, and Z axes are all positive. When created, cubes have one vertex at the origin of the graph, and they have one edge on each of these axes, as you can see here, corner at the origin, edge on the X, edge on the Y, and edge on the Z. So, to sum up our lesson on spheres and cubes, the simplest shapes to build in 3 dimensions, remember a few things. Remember that they are both functions which take one parameter, defining the radius of the sphere and the side length of the cube. Remember that spheres are centered on the origin of the system of coordinates, and that cube is made in the first octant with one vertex on the origin and edges along the positive axes. Lastly, remember that spheres are expensive objects to build in terms of computing time and resources, so they may make more time to create.